The mountains were silent for a moment, unnaturally so, before chaos erupted again. Staff Sergeant Elena Torres crouched behind a fractured boulder, sweat stinging her eyes, fingers trembling as she pressed gauze against a Marine's chest wound. "Stay with me, Connors," she whispered, though her voice was hoarse and barely audible over the crackle of gunfire and the distant thump of mortars. Around her, night had fallen, blanketing the Afghan terrain in darkness. Shadows shifted between trees, and every rustle felt like death creeping closer. She had already sent out the medevac call. 5 injured, 1 critical. Coordinates 0629er. I repeat, urgent pickup. Her voice had been calm, composed. She had learned long ago that in chaos, someone had to stay steady. And that someone, more often than not, was Elena. When the explosion hit, it wasn't the sound that struck her first, it was the sensation, like the earth had opened up and screamed. An RPG slammed into the ridge just above her, and in one deafening moment, stone, flame, and shrapnel consumed the sky. Elena was thrown backward, the radio ripped from her vest as the impact slammed her body into the dirt. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, and for several minutes, there was nothing but darkness. Silence again. But this time it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that came just before grief. Her squad thought she was gone. From the command post miles away, the unit received word, Torres presumed Kia. No visual. Airlift aborted. Mission compromised. But Torres was breathing. Buried under rocks and debris, her leg pinned and blood seeping through her fatigues, she fought to remain conscious. Somewhere nearby, her hand brushed against something soft, fabric. The flag. It had fallen from her medkit, half-burned and blood-stained. A flag she'd wrapped around Private Jensen earlier that week when he panicked under fire. "It's not just a symbol," she'd told him. "It's who we are. We don't leave each other behind." Now, it was all she had. Elena grit her teeth and pulled herself free, the pain lancing through her side like broken glass. Her radio was shattered. Her squad was gone. And behind enemy lines, with no backup and no food, she had 2 choices, give up, or survive. She tore a piece of the flag, tying it around her bleeding arm. "This isn't how it ends," she whispered to the night. It wasn't bravado. It was a promise. A vow to her team, to herself, and to the part of her that still believed in something greater. Then, slowly, dragging her injured leg behind her, Elena began to crawl into the dense, foreign woods, guided by instinct, stubborn will, and the quiet flutter of fabric wrapped around her wrist. She was alone now. But not without purpose. And she wasn't done yet. Elena had stopped counting the days. Her watch was shattered, the sun and moon her only compass. Every breath burned. Her body was bruised, bloodied, and stiff with infection. The flag tied around her arm had soaked through with old blood, now dried to a deep brown. Still, she kept it close. The stars overhead, foreign and sharp, blinked as she stumbled through the pine-choked valley. Her boots were nearly falling apart. Her lips cracked. Every mile felt like 100. But something in her soul refused to quit. Then, on the 7th day, she saw it, smoke. Not from fire or gunfire, but from a hearth. A chimney. Civilization. Elena dropped to her knees, both in relief and fear. If it was an enemy outpost, she was finished. If it wasn't, maybe, just maybe, she had a chance. She waited until dusk, then approached slowly, crawling when she had to, hands trembling. The village was small, 10 or 12 houses, mud-walled, quiet. A goat bleated in the distance. She staggered toward the edge and then collapsed, her vision swimming. A sharp whistle split the air. Within seconds, figures emerged. Men with rifles. Women with wary eyes. Children watching from doorways. Someone shouted. Elena didn't understand the words, but she knew the tone. They thought she was a threat. "I'm not your enemy," she rasped, holding up both hands. She tried to point to the flag tied to her wrist, a shredded remnant of stars and stripes. Medic, she added, tapping the red cross still faintly visible on her vest. American. Then she blacked out. When she woke, it was dark again. She was lying on straw, warm blankets covering her. The smell of herbs and smoke filled the air. Her wounds were wrapped. Someone had cleaned them. Someone had cared. A woman sat beside her, old and stern, yet not unkind. Her weathered face studied Elena with a blend of caution and curiosity. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. "Thank you," Elena whispered, her voice raw. The woman reached into her robe and held out something, her flag. Folded gently. Cleaned. Elena took it with shaking hands. "Hope," she said softly, the word hanging between them like a fragile truce. A small boy peeked around the doorframe. He looked maybe 7. Curious eyes darted between Elena and the old woman. Then he stepped forward, knelt, and handed her a wooden cup of water. That night, as she rested in the barn beneath the stars, hidden beneath hay and wrapped in warmth not just of blankets but of something deeper, Elena understood. These people had no reason to help her. They had every reason to fear her. But still, they had chosen kindness. The pain in her leg had worsened. Each step sent bolts of fire through her body, and her breath came in short, shallow gasps. But she had to move. She knew staying any longer would endanger the villagers, people who had risked everything for a stranger. She couldn't let the enemy find her here. The old woman had sensed her decision before Elena said a word. At dawn, she handed Elena a satchel, flatbread, a flask of water, and a crude walking stick carved from an olive branch. She didn't smile, but her hands lingered as she wrapped a scarf gently around Elena's neck. No words were spoken, only a firm nod of understanding and something close to pride in her eyes. The small boy appeared then, holding out the folded piece of cloth Elena thought she'd lost, the American flag. Frayed, torn, and stained, it was a shadow of what it once was, but to her, it had become something sacred. She blinked back tears and took it, wrapping it tightly around her arm once more. She limped through the outer fields of the village, eyes scanning the horizon. But something wasn't right. A foul smell lingered in the air. Smoke, thick, fresh. Not from cook fires. Then she saw it, flames rising from the far side of the village. Enemy forces. They had come, searching. Retaliating. A shout cracked the silence. Elena turned. A soldier in dark fatigues was pointing at her from a ridge above, shouting in a language she didn't need to understand. A second later, the gunfire began. Adrenaline overtook pain. Elena bolted into the hills, dirt flying behind her boots. Her lungs screamed. Bullets tore through tree trunks around her. The flag snapped in the wind as she ran, clutching the walking stick like a lifeline. She didn't look back. Not until she reached the top of a ridge and saw the fire below consuming the crops, the huts, the village that had sheltered her. Her stomach turned. She didn't know if they had escaped. But she prayed they had. And then, a sound. Faint but real, cut through the haze of gunfire. A buzz in the sky. Elena looked up. A drone. For a second, she didn't believe it. But then, it banked and hovered. Watching. Recording. She raised both hands, then pulled the flag from her arm and held it high, letting it flap above her head. A whir filled the air. Half an hour later, a black hawk skimmed low over the ridgeline. Ropes dropped. Soldiers in full gear rappelled down. One of them, taller, helmet already off, froze as he saw her. "Staff Sergeant Torres," he breathed. Elena, shaking and smeared in dirt, managed a small nod. Corporal Davis dropped his weapon and ran to her. You're supposed to be dead." "Yeah," she rasped with a smile, "I get that a lot." Then her knees buckled, and everything went dark. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mixing with the distant thrum of helicopters and muffled voices speaking in hurried, urgent tones. Her arm was bandaged. Her leg immobilized. A line ran from her wrist to an forebag above. Pain ebbed and flowed in dull waves, but she was alive. Safe. The first face she saw was Corporal Davis, sitting beside her cot with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling jaw. He didn't speak right away. Just handed her something carefully folded in his hands. The flag. She stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing the fabric as if making sure it was real. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with blood, ash, and memory. "They said you were gone," Davis finally whispered. "We all thought. I was," she said quietly. "But I found my way back." News of her return spread through the base faster than wildfire. Medics, officers, engineers, even cooks, paused to catch a glimpse of the woman who had defied death. Soldiers lined the path as she was wheeled toward the ceremony tent 3 days later. They stood at attention, saluting not with fanfare, but with reverence. But Elena had one request. "No wheelchair," she told the attending medic. "I'm walking." They tried to protest. Her leg wasn't ready. She was still weak. But Elena was immovable. So, with a crutch under one arm and the flag clutched tightly in the other, she stepped out into the golden light of sunset. Her steps were slow, halting. Each one sent a jolt of fire through her body. But she didn't waver. The base fell silent. She walked past the barracks, past the flagpole, past the command center, until she reached the center of camp where her unit was waiting. The same men and women who had once thought she was lost forever. They parted for her like a tide. Colonel Reyes stood at the front, eyes glassy. He didn't salute. Instead, he stepped forward and took off his cap. "We thought we lost you," he said, voice cracking. "I promised I'd come back," Elena replied. Then, slowly, she lifted the flag, her flag, tattered and holy, and placed it in his hands. "Raise this one tonight. It's been through something." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridgeline, they raised her flag on the pole in the center of camp. It flapped in the breeze, scarred, faded, beautiful. A symbol not just of a nation, but of resilience. Of sacrifice. Of unexpected kindness in a world at war. Elena watched, hand over her heart, eyes full of tears. Not for herself, but for the nameless villagers who risked everything. For the boy with the wooden cup. For the old woman with the quiet eyes. For the strangers who had reminded her what humanity really meant. And for the home she had finally walked back to.